Israel-Palestine question time debate tonight. So tonight we have some absolutely fantastic speakers, and before we go any further, I'll just give them a chance to all introduce themselves for you. So starting from my left, if I can just pass the microphone down.
Jeremy Corbyn, Labour Member of Parliament, Islington North, active in lots of peace movements, patron of Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and visited Gaza, the West Bank and Israel on many, many occasions, as well as the refugee camps in all of the neighbouring countries. And thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Victor Katan, and I'm currently the Programme Director for an organisation called Al-Shabaka, which is the Palestinian Policy Network. It's an international NGO bringing Palestinian scholars together. I'm also the author of a book on the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict, which I understand is on sale today over there.
It's very good. Very, very good.
I am half Palestinian. My father's Palestinian, my mother's British, and my Palestinian side of my family originally comes from Bethlehem. And thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back in Birmingham. I've been here last month. My name is Ben White, and I'm a writer and an activist. I've written a lot of articles on Israel-Palestine over a few years now. I've been going out to the region since 2003. I wrote a book called Israeli-Apartheid, A Beginner's Guide, which is also on sale next to Victor's on the side there. And my second book will be out next month, called Palestinians in Israel, Segregation, Discrimination and Democracy. Thanks so much.
Hi, thanks very much for the invite. My name is Alan Johnson. I'm a director at BICOM, which is the Britain-Israel Communications and Research Centre. It's an independent organisation. My background in this issue is coming out of the left. I'm an editorial board member at Dissent magazine, which is an American democratic left magazine. In the early 1980s, I was involved with attempts to stop the banning of Jewish societies, and from there worked with UJS as part of a left group which developed support for the two-state solution, which at the time on the left in Britain in the 80s was very, very unusual. And that's my route to this, and I'm not Jewish.
Hi everyone, my name is Joseph Moses. I'm a student here at Birmingham. I have a strong attachment to the region and to Israel. It's where a lot of my family is from. I've visited the region a number of times, and I've been very involved in promoting a two-state solution here at Birmingham, and I don't have a book on sale outside.
Hi, I'm David Hirsch. I teach sociology at Goldsmiths. My work, both politically really and academic, is on the relationship between hostility to Israel and anti-Semitism, which I think is complex and interesting. My work is more on the way in which Israel and Palestine is thought about outside the region than it is actually about Israel and Palestine.
Let's thank all our speakers for being here tonight. So the format tonight is that we're going to have 4 main questions, and then there will be opportunities for floor questions from all of you guys. Just want to say before we start though, can you please not interrupt speakers whilst they are speaking, because you do get an opportunity to make those questions. And likewise, it goes without saying, no heckling, no booing, nothing along those lines, be nice to be nice, that kind of thing. Also just to say that the views expressed tonight are not necessarily those of the debating society, although they're those of the speakers themselves, so just to bear that in mind. Also, all of the speakers' time is protected time, so they can't be interrupted during a speech from other speakers as well. So without further ado, if we move on to our first question, which will start to the right. We'll try and go left to right and right to left to make it fair. So the first question is, how might effective, sustainable negotiation between Israel and Palestine be realised? What do you suggest as the most realistic, equitable solution, digestible by all? So if we could start to the right there and work our way along.
Well, I think what we need is a negotiated settlement between Israel and Palestine. I think we need a free and democratic Israel alongside a free and democratic Palestine. I think the two states and the two nations have to come to a deal, and I think we all know what the deal is. I think the deal is that the predominantly Palestinian areas in the West Bank and in Gaza should be a Palestinian state, and Israel should continue to exist until it decides it doesn't want any longer to exist. As to what we can do, I think is an interesting question. I've been thinking about, what I wanted to do was to come here and say to you, I'm coming at this issue from the left, which is true. And I'm trying to think through what it means to be on the left. And I'm thinking, I've just written a few notes. I think one of the things it means is that we embrace universal values. Is that we're on the left, and our starting point is to say every human being on the planet is in some sense of equal worth, right? So we don't say everybody's equal, not everybody, is good looking, and not everybody's fast, and not everybody, the rest of it. We're not all equal, but in some fundamental sense we are of equal worth. And I think left values flow almost all from there. And I think that's why we embrace an idea, actually, that the things which divide us, like nation and like gender and like religion and like sexuality and like class and wealth and poverty, are very often predominantly constructed by human beings. They're not natural phenomena. They're, I'm a sociologist from Goldsmiths, what can I tell you? These are social constructions. And so, being on the left, we're not interested in just wishing them away, because that would be a violation of another principle, actually, which is that we start where people are. We start in the world as it exists, and we see how it moves and what we can do with it. So we don't just wish nation, gender, class, the rest of it away, but we struggle. And it seems to me that that's what we can do. We can struggle for some kind of equality within the Middle East, between Israelis and Palestinians, between other people, other minorities, other states in the Middle East, and their relationship between them and the rest of the world. So I think fundamentally we're about making peace. And I think the issue of Israel and Palestine is in a sense quite simple. We should embrace and make solidarity with the people who want to make peace with the other. And we should oppose political forces which dream of all-out victory against some enemy which is defined as evil. I think that's very straightforward. Now, Israel needs to persuade the Palestinians that it's serious about about withdrawing from the occupied territories. It's very bad at doing that. It says it's for that, but it's very, very bad at persuading anybody that it's serious. The Palestinians have to persuade the Israelis that they don't see a Palestinian state as a stepping stone in the war against Israel, which will end in some final victory. And the Palestinians in general are very bad at doing that. The Israelis and the Palestinians are very clear what they need to do. They need to make it clear to everybody in the region and to each other that they are for peace. What we can do is more complicated. And I think I'm running out of time. What we do anywhere, we do solidarity, we educate ourselves, we think, we discuss, we facilitate contact, we treat people as human beings, and we oppose bigotry.
Thank you.
I'd like to start by addressing the second question before I tackle the first. I think it's quite clear what the solution to this conflict is, and that is a two-state solution. I believe that both people have a fundamental right to achieve self-determination. Both people have the right to live with peace and security alongside one another. And to reiterate something that David said is that we're quite aware of what the final settlement is going to look like. Saeb Erekat came and spoke in Birmingham University only a few years ago and made it very clear that both countries know what the deal looks like, they just need to be able to sign it. For Israel, it has a stark choice that it's going to have to make. Due to demographics, in the years to come, it's going to have to choose between being Jewish or being democratic if it doesn't achieve a two-state solution. What this means is that the very viability and the future existence of the State of Israel is intrinsically linked to the creation of the Palestinian one. For Israel, it needs a two-state solution. But for the Palestinians themselves, they also need a two-state solution. The Palestinians have been under an occupation for 44 years, and under an occupation under Arab states before that. The time has come for them to also achieve their right to self-determination, and for them to also be able to grow and to flourish. What we can see from the vast majority of polls within Israel and Palestine is that most people want a two-state solution. The Citizen Negotiation Plan identifies the two-state solution as resolving the 10 core issues that exist. From the Arab Spring and the Israel tent protests, what we can see is that people power is important. And this comes on to answering the first part of the question, how it's achieved. Currently, unfortunately, what we've got the Palestinian Authority embarking on unilateralism folly to prove its own worth to its own people. And we have the Israeli government pandering to its own right-wing elements to prove its own worth. What we need is those same people that desire a two-state solution to organise, to propel their leadership to break the growing trend of intransigence. And this is how peace can be reached. I think we can all see that the future for the region rests on achieving a two-state solution. And the way to come at it is from the people.
Okay, I'll try and make 6 points in 3 minutes. First point, this conflict can't be resolved outside of direct negotiations between the parties. Second point, what the international community has to do and what I think international civil society has to do when it's trying to measure its actions is to think, is what we're doing now likely to get the two parties into negotiations, or is it likely to push them away from negotiations? Which I think, when we come to maybe discussions around boycotts and so on, BDS, demonising Israel, isolating Israel, that's the thing to bear in mind. Is this going to get the parties to negotiations? If we don't get them to negotiations, we do not have a solution. However good it feels in your heart, however you can express your identity through those kind of politics, it is not getting the parties to the only place that can make the deal. Thirdly, I think we have to deny the parties alternatives to negotiations as far as possible.